My name is David Martinez. I'm 29 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was working as a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas, pulling in a decent salary that kept me and my wife comfortable in our 2-bedroom apartment in South Austin. Her name was Jessica Chen, and we'd been married for 3 years after dating since college. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs that I completely missed. But when you're in love, when you trust someone completely, you tend to ignore the little things that don't quite add up. The way she'd get irritated when I talked about my work projects, how she'd roll her eyes when I mentioned wanting to save up for a house, the subtle comments about how we weren't living the life she'd imagined when she agreed to marry me. Jessica worked part-time at a high-end boutique in downtown Austin. She'd always been interested in fashion and luxury brands, and I thought the job was perfect for her. It gave her something to do while we figured out our long-term plans, and the employee discount meant she could afford some of the designer pieces she loved so much. I never questioned why someone working 20 hours a week at a clothing store needed quite so many new outfits, or why her taste seemed to get more expensive every month. The problem started in March of last year when our company went through a major restructuring. Tech companies do this all the time, especially smaller ones trying to stay competitive. Management brought in consultants, held endless meetings about efficiency and optimization, and basically made everyone nervous about job security for about 2 months. Most of us figured it would blow over once they made some adjustments to the organizational chart. I wasn't worried. My performance reviews had always been solid. I got along well with my team, and I was working on a project that was generating real revenue for the company. Plus, I'd been there for almost 4 years, which in the tech world means you're practically part of the furniture. I'd survived 2 previous rounds of layoffs and assumed my experience would protect me from whatever changes were coming. Jessica seemed more anxious about the situation than I was. She kept asking questions about severance packages, about how long unemployment benefits last, about whether I had any backup plans if things went south. I told her not to worry, that even if something did happen, I had enough savings to cover our expenses for several months, while I looked for something new. The Austin tech scene was booming, and software engineers were in high demand. That conversation should have been a red flag, not because she was concerned about our financial security, that's normal in any marriage, but because of how she reacted when I mentioned our savings. She got this look on her face, this brief flash of panic, before quickly changing the subject to something else. At the time, I chalked it up to general anxiety about the unknown. Now I realize she was calculating something entirely different. If you enjoy stories of betrayal, shocking revelations, and the kind of revenge that changes everything, like this video, and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. The layoffs happened on a Thursday in late April. I got called into a conference room at 10 a.m. along with 6 other people from various departments. Human Resources was there with their scripted speeches about difficult decisions and restructuring for future growth. They offered a decent severance package, 3 months of salary plus benefits, and assured us this was purely a business decision, nothing personal. I'll be honest, getting laid off hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about losing income, though that was obviously a concern. It was about losing my professional identity, my daily routine, my sense of purpose. I'd defined myself by my work for so long that suddenly having nothing to do felt disorienting and depressing. Jessica's reaction surprised me. Instead of being supportive or sympathetic, she seemed almost angry. Not angry at the company for letting me go, but angry at me for somehow allowing it to happen. She kept asking what I could have done differently, why I hadn't seen it coming, whether I'd done something to put myself on the layoff list. When I tried to explain that layoffs in tech are usually random, based on budget cuts rather than performance, she dismissed it. She said I must have done something wrong, that people don't just lose good jobs for no reason. The way she said it made me feel like she thought less of me, like being unemployed made me less valuable as a husband. I threw myself into job searching, updated my resume, reached out to my professional network, applied to dozens of positions every day. I was confident I'd find something within a few weeks, maybe a month at most. Austin was full of tech companies, and my skills were in demand. Several recruiters reached out almost immediately, and I had 3 interviews scheduled within my first week of unemployment. But Jessica's attitude kept getting worse. She'd make comments about how I was spending my days, suggesting I wasn't trying hard enough or wasn't being strategic about my search. When I told her about interviews, she'd focus on why I hadn't heard back yet rather than being encouraging about the opportunities. It felt like she was looking for reasons to be disappointed in me. The first real fight happened about 6 weeks after I lost my job. I was still getting severance, so our financial situation hadn't changed at all, but Jessica was acting like we were about to be evicted. She suggested I should take any job I could find, even if it meant a significant pay cut, just to have income coming in. I explained that taking a job too far below my skill level could actually hurt my career in the long run, that it was worth being patient for the right opportunity rather than jumping into something out of desperation. She accused me of being stubborn and unrealistic, of caring more about my pride than our future together. And that's when she said something that really stung. She told me that when she married me, she thought she was getting someone ambitious, someone who would build a successful career and provide stability. But now she was starting to wonder if she'd been wrong about who I really was. I was hurt, but I tried to be understanding. Job loss is stressful for both partners in a marriage, and I figured she was just processing her own anxiety about the situation. I suggested we go to couples counseling to work through the communication issues, but she said we didn't need therapy. We needed me to get my act together. 2 months into my unemployment, I finally got a job offer. It wasn't perfect. The salary was about 15% less than what I'd been making, but it was with a solid company doing interesting work. I was excited to tell Jessica, thinking she'd be relieved that the uncertainty was finally over. Her response shocked me. Instead of being happy, she seemed disappointed that the salary wasn't higher. She asked if I'd negotiated, if I'd pushed for more money, if this was really the best I could do. When I explained that the offer was actually pretty good considering the market conditions and the fact that I'd been out of work for 2 months, she just shook her head. That night, she barely spoke to me during dinner. When I asked what was wrong, she said she'd been doing some thinking about our relationship, about whether we wanted the same things out of life. She said she needed some space to figure out her feelings, and that maybe she should stay with her sister for a few days. I was confused. We'd just solved our biggest problem. I had a job. Income was about to start flowing again, and we could move forward with our lives. Why was she pulling away now, when things were finally looking up? She packed a bag and left that night. Said she'd call me in a few days when she'd had time to think. I spent the weekend alone in our apartment trying to understand what had gone so wrong. I kept replaying conversations from the past few months, looking for clues about what I'd missed or what I could have done differently. On Monday, I started my new job at Meridian Technologies. It was a smaller company than my previous employer, but the team was great and the work was challenging. My manager, Sarah Kim, seemed genuinely excited to have me on board and made it clear that there were opportunities for advancement if I proved myself. Jessica called that evening. Her voice was cold, distant, like she was talking to a stranger rather than her husband. She said she'd made a decision about us, about our marriage, and that we needed to talk in person. My stomach dropped. I knew from her tone that whatever she had to say wasn't going to be good news. She came by the apartment the next evening. She'd been staying with her sister for almost a week, and the distance between us felt enormous. She sat down on our couch, the same couch where we'd watched movies and planned our future together, and told me she wanted a divorce. Her reasoning was brutal in its simplicity. She said she'd married someone she thought was going somewhere, someone with ambition and drive. But watching me struggle to find work, seeing me accept a job that paid less than my previous one, had made her realize we weren't compatible long-term. She talked about wanting a partner who could provide the kind of lifestyle she'd always imagined for herself. Someone who wouldn't be satisfied with just getting by, who would push for more, achieve more, earn more. She said she still cared about me as a person, but that she couldn't see a future where we'd both be happy together. I was devastated. I tried to argue that a temporary setback didn't define my entire career trajectory. That losing one job didn't mean I lacked ambition or drive. That marriage meant supporting each other through difficult times, not abandoning ship at the first sign of trouble. But she'd already made up her mind. She said she'd spoken to a lawyer and would be filing papers within the week. She wanted to divide our assets and move on with her life as quickly and cleanly as possible. No counseling, no trial separation, no attempt to work through our problems. Just a clean break. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and emotional devastation. Jessica moved out completely, taking half the furniture and leaving me in an apartment that felt hollow and empty. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I'd expected, partly because we didn't have children or significant assets to fight over. I threw myself into my new job, working late hours and taking on extra projects. It was partly to distract myself from the pain of losing my marriage, but also because I was determined to prove that Jessica had been wrong about me, that I wasn't some loser who would settle for mediocrity. Sarah Kim noticed my dedication and started giving me more responsibility. Within a month, I was leading small projects and collaborating directly with clients. The work was satisfying in a way my previous job had never been, more creative and strategic rather than just grinding out code all day. But the loneliness was crushing. Coming home to an empty apartment every night, eating dinner alone, having nobody to share the small victories and frustrations of daily life. I'd lost not just my wife, but my best friend, my partner, my sense of belonging somewhere. The divorce was finalized 3 months after Jessica asked for it. I signed the papers in a lawyer's office downtown, dividing up the remnants of our life together with the cold efficiency of a business transaction. Jessica wasn't even there. She'd had her lawyer handle everything, like I was just another item on her to-do list to be checked off and forgotten. That night, I sat in my half-empty apartment and wondered if she'd been right. Maybe I was settling for less than I could achieve. Maybe I lacked the killer instinct needed to really succeed in life. Maybe she'd been smart to cut her losses and find someone with more potential. But something else was stirring inside me alongside the self-doubt. A quiet anger at being judged and discarded so casually. A determination to prove that her assessment of my worth had been not just wrong, but spectacularly wrong. I didn't want to succeed just for myself anymore. I wanted to succeed in a way that would make her realize what she'd thrown away. I had no idea that opportunity was about to present itself in a way I never could have imagined. I'd been working at Meridian Technologies for about 4 months when Sarah Kim called me into her office for what I assumed was a routine check-in. I'd been performing well, exceeding expectations on every project, and getting positive feedback from clients. The job that Jessica had dismissed as beneath me was actually turning out to be the best career move I'd ever made. Sarah closed the door behind me, which was unusual. Our meetings were typically casual, often happening in the break room over coffee rather than in her office with the door shut. She had a strange expression on her face, somewhere between excitement and nervousness. "David," she said, settling into her chair, "I need to tell you something that's going to sound completely crazy, but I promise you it's true. I've been waiting for the right time to have this conversation, and I think you're ready to hear it." I had no idea what she was talking about. Ready to hear what? I'd been doing good work, meeting all my deadlines, getting along well with the team. If there was some kind of problem, I couldn't imagine what it might be. She took a deep breath. Meridian Technologies isn't just another tech company. We're actually a subsidiary of Chen Industries, which is owned by Robert Chen. You might know that name because Robert Chen is Jessica's father. The words didn't make sense at first. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline or the explanation that would make this statement logical. Jessica's father owned a construction company, not a tech conglomerate. He built strip malls and small office buildings around Austin. I'd met him dozens of times at family dinners and holidays. Sarah continued. Robert Chen has been quietly expanding his business portfolio for the past 5 years. Construction is still his main focus, but he's been investing in tech companies, real estate development, and several other industries. Meridian is one of his newer acquisitions. I was still processing this information when she dropped the real bombshell. He specifically asked me to recruit you, David. Not for your technical skills, though those are obviously valuable. He recruited you because of what Jessica did to you, because he was disgusted by how his daughter treated you during the most difficult period of your life. My brain felt like it was short-circuiting. Jessica's father had orchestrated my hiring? The man who'd sat across from me at countless family dinners, who'd shaken my hand at my wedding, who'd welcomed me into his family, had been watching my divorce unfold and decided to intervene. Sarah pulled out a file folder from her desk drawer. Robert had me compile a complete report on your professional background, your work history, your references, everything. But he also had me investigate what really happened during your marriage. What he found out about his daughter's behavior made him furious. She opened the folder and pulled out what looked like bank statements and credit card bills. Do you remember Jessica's shopping habits during the last year of your marriage? How she seemed to be buying more and more expensive items, even after you lost your job? I nodded. It had bothered me at the time, but I'd assumed she was stress shopping or trying to maintain some sense of normalcy during an uncertain period. I never thought to question where the money was coming from, since she was only working part-time. Robert hired a private investigator, Sarah said. Not to spy on you, but to understand why Jessica was so eager to divorce you so quickly. What they found was that Jessica had been planning to leave you long before you lost your job. She'd been having an affair for over a year with Marcus Whitfield. The name hit me like a physical blow. Marcus Whitfield was the owner of the boutique where Jessica worked, a guy in his mid-40s who drove a BMW and wore expensive suits and had a reputation around Austin for being a player. I'd met him a few times when I picked Jessica up from work, and something about him had always rubbed me wrong, but I'd never suspected anything. The investigator found hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even jewelry purchases that Marcus had made for Jessica, Sarah continued. She'd been using your joint credit cards to cover her own expenses while he paid for their dates and trips. The reason she was so anxious about your job loss wasn't because she was worried about your financial security. It was because she needed an excuse to leave you without looking like the villain. I felt sick. The woman I'd loved and trusted completely had been lying to me for over a year. Every fight we'd had about my unemployment, every criticism of my job search, every moment when she'd made me feel like I wasn't good enough had been based on a lie. She hadn't left me because I lost my job. She'd left me because she'd already found someone else. But that's not the worst part, Sarah said. Robert found out that Jessica had been stealing from your joint savings account for months, transferring money to a personal account that you didn't know about. Nearly $15,000 that she was planning to take with her when she left. The betrayal kept getting deeper. Not only had she been cheating and lying, but she'd been systematically stealing money from our marriage to fund her exit strategy. Money I'd worked years to save, money I'd planned to use for a down payment on a house, money that represented our shared future together. Robert was livid when he found out, Sarah said. He told me that he'd raised Jessica to be better than that, and he was ashamed of what she'd become. He said the least he could do was make sure you landed on your feet after what his daughter put you through. So, this job, my performance, the opportunities I'd been given, none of it had been earned on my merit. I was just a charity case being managed by my ex-wife's guilty father. Sarah must have seen the expression on my face because she quickly shook her head. David, you need to understand something. Robert may have arranged for you to get an interview here, but everything that's happened since then has been based entirely on your abilities. I couldn't keep you on the team if you weren't performing. I couldn't promote you if you weren't ready for more responsibility. She pulled out another set of documents. These are your performance reviews, your client feedback scores, your project completion records. You're not just meeting expectations, you're exceeding them by a significant margin. Robert may have opened a door for you, but you're the one who walked through it and proved you belonged here. That made me feel slightly better, but I was still reeling from the revelations about Jessica. A year of gaslighting, of being made to feel inadequate and worthless, when the real problem had been her deception and betrayal. All those nights I'd questioned my worth as a husband, wondering what I'd done wrong, blaming myself for the failure of our marriage. "There's something else," Sarah said. "Robert wants to meet with you. He has a proposition that he thinks might interest you, something that could be a significant step forward in your career. But he wanted me to explain the situation first so you'd understand the context." I agreed to the meeting, partly out of curiosity and partly because I felt like I owed Robert Chen an explanation for his daughter's behavior, even though none of it had been my fault. We met the following evening at a steakhouse in downtown Austin, the kind of upscale place where deals get made over expensive wine and perfectly cooked ribeyes. Robert looked older than I remembered, more tired, like the stress of learning about Jessica's true character had aged him. He stood up when I arrived, shook my hand firmly, and thanked me for coming. "David," he said after we'd ordered, "I owe you an apology. Not just for what Jessica did, though I'm deeply sorry for that. I owe you an apology for not seeing who she really was becoming and stopping it before she hurt you the way she did." And he explained that he'd suspected something was wrong during the final months of our marriage, but he'd assumed it was normal stress related to my job loss. It wasn't until after the divorce, when Jessica had asked him for a loan to help her get established in her new life, that he'd started investigating her financial situation. That's when he discovered the affair, the theft, the elaborate deception she'd constructed to justify leaving me. He'd confronted her about it, and she'd actually tried to defend her actions by claiming I was holding her back from the life she deserved. I told her that marriage means supporting each other through difficulties, not abandoning ship when things get challenging, Robert said. I told her that you were a good man who deserved better than what she'd given you. She accused me of taking your side over hers, and we haven't spoken since. The conversation was painful but also liberating. For months, I'd been carrying the weight of a failed marriage, assuming I was somehow responsible for Jessica's unhappiness. Learning that her dissatisfaction had nothing to do with my worth as a husband and everything to do with her own character defects was like having a massive burden lifted from my shoulders. Then, Robert made his offer. He was planning to launch a new division within his company, focused on developing software solutions for the construction industry. Project management systems, client communication platforms, cost estimation tools, things that could streamline operations and improve efficiency across his various businesses. He wanted me to head up this new division, not as a favor or an act of charity, but because my background made me uniquely qualified to bridge the gap between technology and construction. It would mean a significant salary increase, equity in the new venture, and the opportunity to build something from the ground up. And the offer was incredible, but I had to ask the obvious question. What happens when Jessica finds out that you hired me? What happens when she realizes her father is helping her ex-husband succeed? Robert smiled grimly. She's going to find out very soon, because I'm planning to tell her myself. She needs to understand that actions have consequences, and that treating good people badly doesn't happen in a vacuum. She made her choice when she decided to betray your marriage. Now she gets to live with the results of that choice. I accepted his offer, not because I wanted revenge against Jessica, though I'll admit the idea of her discovering my success was satisfying. I accepted because it was genuinely a great opportunity that aligned with my career goals and interests. The new division, Tech Build Solutions, launched 6 months later. We developed 3 software products in the first year, all of which were adopted by major construction companies throughout Texas. My salary tripled from what I'd been making at my previous job, and the equity stake made me a legitimate millionaire on paper. The success was intoxicating. Not just the money, though that was nice, but the sense of building something meaningful, of being recognized for my contributions, of proving that Jessica's assessment of my potential had been spectacularly wrong. The news about my new position spread through Austin's business community pretty quickly. It's a smaller town than people realize, especially in professional circles. And a new tech division launching under Robert Chen's umbrella was notable enough to get covered in the local business press. That's how Jessica found out. Not from her father, as Robert had planned, but from a newspaper article that mentioned me by name as the head of Tech Build Solutions. According to mutual friends, she'd been at a coffee shop when someone showed her the article on their phone. Her reaction was apparently visible from across the room. The first contact came about a week after the article was published. A text message to my personal phone, which she still had even though we'd been divorced for over a year. It was simple, just asking if we could talk, saying she had something important to tell me. I ignored it. I'd moved on with my life and had no interest in rehashing our failed marriage or listening to whatever justification she'd constructed for her behavior. But the messages kept coming. Texts, voicemails, emails, each one more desperate than the last. She claimed she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd been confused and scared during a difficult time, that she'd never stopped loving me and regretted the divorce every day. The voicemail that finally got my attention was different from the others. Her voice was shaking, and she sounded genuinely broken. "David, I know I have no right to ask this, but please give me 5 minutes to explain what really happened. I know about Marcus. I know you probably think I'm a terrible person, but there's more to the story that you don't understand." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her, not because I was interested in reconciliation, but because I was curious about what possible explanation she could offer for over a year of deception and betrayal. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in South Austin that neither of us had been to before. Jessica looked different than I remembered. Thinner, more stressed, like the past year hadn't been as easy for her as she'd hoped it would be. She started by admitting everything: the affair with Marcus, the financial deception, the lies about why she wanted a divorce. She said she'd been selfish and cruel, and that she understood if I could never forgive her. But then she told me something I hadn't expected. Marcus had dumped her 3 months after our divorce was finalized. Apparently, the thrill of the affair had worn off once Jessica was actually available, and he'd moved on to his next conquest. She'd found herself alone, working at a boutique that barely paid her bills, living in a studio apartment she could barely afford. She'd tried to get back into her father's good graces, hoping he'd help her get established, but Robert had cut her off completely after learning about her behavior during our marriage. No financial support, no help finding a better job, no family safety net to fall back on. "David, I made the biggest mistake of my life when I left you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I wanted excitement and luxury, and someone who could give me a more glamorous lifestyle. But what I really wanted was a partner who loved me and supported me and built a life with me. I had that with you, and I threw it away for nothing." She begged me to consider giving our marriage another chance, said she'd learned from her mistakes and would spend the rest of her life making up for what she'd done. She'd seen the business articles about my success and realized that she'd been wrong about my potential. Wrong about everything. I listened to everything she had to say, and then I gave her my answer. "Jessica, I appreciate you being honest with me about what happened, and I'm sorry that things didn't work out the way you hoped they would, but I can't go back to a relationship that was built on lies and ended in betrayal." I explained that trust, once broken the way she'd broken it, couldn't simply be repaired with apologies and promises, that I'd spent months rebuilding my self-worth and my life after our marriage ended, and I wasn't willing to risk that progress by trying to resurrect something that had been fundamentally damaged. She kept pushing, saying she understood it would take time to rebuild trust, that she was willing to do whatever it took to prove she'd changed, but I could see that her desperation wasn't really about love or regret. It was about security, about wanting back into a life that looked more appealing now that I was successful. If I'd still been unemployed, if Tech Build Solutions had failed, if I was struggling financially, would you be here asking for another chance? I asked her. She couldn't answer that question honestly, and we both knew it. I wished her well and walked away from that coffee shop knowing I'd made the right decision. Not because I wanted to punish her for what she'd done, but because I deserved a relationship with someone who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide for them. 6 months later, I met Amanda Rodriguez at a tech conference in San Antonio. She was a project manager for a software development firm, smart and funny, and completely unimpressed by my success story. When I told her about my divorce, she said it sounded like I dodged a bullet and should probably send Jessica a thank you card for doing me such a huge favor. We've been together for 8 months now, and I'm happier than I've been in years. Not because Amanda is perfect, or because our relationship doesn't require work, but because it's built on honesty and mutual respect rather than convenience and financial security. Tech Build Solutions continues to grow. We've expanded into 3 new markets and are considering going public within the next 2 years. Robert Chen has become not just my business partner, but a genuine mentor, and I think he appreciates having someone in his professional family who shares his values about integrity and hard work. I still get occasional messages from Jessica, usually around holidays or my birthday, but I don't respond to them anymore. She made her choice when she decided that I wasn't worth fighting for during the most challenging period of my life. I've made my choice to build a future with someone who sees my value even when times are difficult. Looking back, losing my job was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because it led to my current success, though I'm grateful for that. It was the best thing because it revealed Jessica's true character before we had children or bought a house or intertwined our lives in ways that would have made separating even more painful. Sometimes the worst moments in your life are actually redirecting you towards something better. Sometimes the people who abandon you are doing you a favor by showing you who they really are. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and building a life with people who appreciate your worth. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.